Okay, so this is a short little tutorial or kind of a cheat video on identifying important literary objects. You might have heard of this as symbolism, but we're going to forget that word for right now. That's an extra slide. So I'm skipping on to the next one, and that is a 4-step process. And these steps are supposed to be the easiest way, sort of like a shortcut, on how to identify one of those literary objects or symbols in a poem, in a short story, in a chapter, or maybe even in a novel. So, step 1, draw a few pictures or images of important objects from the text. I don't care how great of an artist you are, but you can do it. Number 2, next to each object, write 3 sentences about how the characters feel or how they reacted to that object in the story. Step 3, reread your sentences and then identify the most important feeling or emotion connected with that object as it appears in the story. I'll show you an example in a second. And last but not least, step 4, draw an equal symbol next to the object with the emotion or feeling that it represents. Okay, so here comes an example. Number 1, as I already said, is to draw important objects from the story. So I chose to do an example from The Lottery, that short story we all read by Shirley Jackson, and I chose to draw 2 important objects that I remembered from that story. The first object were the cards. She didn't really specify what color they were, but I do remember there being one black dot on one of those cards. So that's what I drew and labeled there on the left. On the right, I chose to draw the box that the villagers had to draw or select the cards from. I think it might have been black. I do remember her mentioning the color of that. Okay, on to step 2. Here are my 3 sentences. It's a little messy, but each of the 3 sentences has an arrow drawn to the objects rather that it represents. So I'll start with my first object. If you remember correctly, that was the cards that each villager selected from the box. So I said that each family has to select one of the cards. If their card has a black dot, each family member from that person's family has to select another card. In other words, 1 per family member. The family member who selects the card with a black dot is then, if you remember, sacrificed. Not a very happy ending. Okay, so yeah, I did it for those 3, for that object, the cards, but I think I'd like to focus a little bit more on the black box. So on the right-hand side, you can see my 3 sentences. The box is old. I remember it being made of wood and that it was painted black. Mr. Summers, the guy in charge of the lottery, calls each family member up, or family up rather, to select a card of fate. Although he never said it was fate. He was kind of laughing around and joking. I didn't think he was taking it that seriously. But my last sentence is, if you are the unlucky one from the chosen family, you have been sentenced to die. So in other words, if you were the person from the chosen family that got the black dot on your card, I think we were able to infer that they threw rocks or stones that person. So I underlined some keywords and I used the yellow marker to do that. I underlined black, I underlined fate, and then unlucky, chosen, and die. So you can see my notes there. That's sort of my think aloud. I underlined black because in other stories I read, and poems too, and even songs, black usually is connected somehow to death, which is, as we know, pretty sad. I also underlined the word that I had written, fate, because it's not always a good ending. That's what fate means. Sometimes it can be good, sometimes it can be very sad and tragic. And I also underlined die because it connects back to the black word that I had chose up above and fate. And as we all know, to the ending of that story, that makes perfect sense. So, on to the next 3. I went ahead, as I already said, and selected that black box as my object, and here's what I think it equals, or what this object could represent, what it symbolizes, and that is death, or a morbid fate, a morbid ending. So, those are the 4 steps. Up next, I'd like you to give this a go. It's your turn. So make sure you've completed your notes on that sheet that you were given, and your job after you've completed your notes, your need to know details, is to identify a symbol for either Finding Nemo or Despicable Me, one of those 2 movies, being sure to, of course, follow each of the 4 steps. Good luck!